Hello everyone, my name is Trevor Bragg here to give you everything you need to know about living in Phoenix, and today's a unique one. This is typically not my cup of tea, or should I say cup of water, of the topics that I tend to get into as far as on my channel. I'm mostly real estate driven, I'm a realtor here, but somehow I get asked this question almost more than any other question from people coming from out of state looking to move in Phoenix. They ask me, is Phoenix running out of water, or what's the water scenario? What's happening? Should we be concerned with it for 15 years down in the future? And honestly, when I first got asked this, I had no clue what they were talking about. I didn't even know we had a water issue, and maybe I was ignorant, but yeah, it didn't even occur to me that this was a thing. I knew we were in a desert, I knew we were in a drought, but I didn't know it was something people wouldn't move here for. But it became such a common question to a realtor nonetheless, although I do try to pride myself in an expert in the Phoenix area. I am by no means a water expert. I don't even know what the official title is, but I am not the water expert. And so I had to do my own research. Thus, how this video came about. I decided to actually dive in and figure out what's the scenario with water in Phoenix and if you should be concerned about it when moving here. One thing that's very ironic is nobody in Phoenix is very worried about it. And that may sound ignorant, but let me explain why I think it kind of adds to my end position here. So I got 15 people in my real estate office. Most of them grew up and lived in Arizona their whole lives. What do you know about this water scenario? Most people never heard of it. They heard of the thing that happened in Rio Verde. We're going to talk about that. But they really didn't know there was much to worry about. So it's funny, the people living in Phoenix are either have a blind eye or just don't realize that we're in any sort of water drought. And I think that really comes about to why this question gets asked so much. I've never heard of anyone leaving Arizona because of our water issues. And most people in Arizona don't even know that we're in any sort of drought. But people from out of state do. It's such a common question. The only time I've ever been asked about our water issues are people coming from out of state. The people in state don't ask me, hey, I'm living in Peoria looking to move into Scottsdale. What's the water scenario? Never had that asked before. But it does happen from out of state, so that begs the question to why. And I think it is because of the news that has been driven, and especially as of late, to where this question gets asked so much. And so let's look at that. Why are we in any sort of water crisis? Why do I get asked this much? And I think the news is a big deal. Look at some of these headlines right here. In deep red corner of Arizona, a threat of losing water starts to outweigh fear of regulation. Next one, Scottsdale, Arizona cuts off water to suburb in response to Colorado River drought. And the best one, skipped showers, paper plates, and Arizona suburbs water is cut off. Hundreds of Arizona households set to be without water by end of year. Some of these are just straight up lies. Like literally some of those are lies. They're pure clickbait articles. There is some truth to them though. So the big thing you need to know is what happened in Rio Verde. This is really what caused the most recent questions, although I have had questions before this, but recently this has driven the fear. In Rio Verde, they hauled water from Scottsdale. They had an agreement where Scottsdale said, hey, we'll give you some of our water. Rio Verde didn't have enough, and they would haul it to their properties. And this was an agreement that took place, and Scottsdale had this in writing, and they told Rio Verde at any time, basically, we can remove this. They'll give them a heads up. But Scottsdale was basically doing this to be nice to Rio Verde. They didn't have to. Obviously, Rio Verde pays them for it. But Scottsdale at any time could say, hey, this is our water. We're no longer going to give it to you. That's exactly what happened. And someone in the Scottsdale Water Department even said that 7 years ago, they started to warn Rio Verde that this could happen. In 2016, they told them that they considered removing their hauled access to the water. And then again, they reminded them in 2017, in 2018, they reminded them in 2021, in 2022. So this wasn't like a huge, no way Scottsdale just did this. But at the same time, Scottsdale doing this really hurts Rio Verde and puts the people in Rio Verde in some sort of rough scenario because they're figuring out where they're going to find water. I honestly don't know where their water comes from right now or what's happening in the future. I know those people are not without water, but they are finding new ways to make it happen. At the end of the day, this looks poorly on Rio Verde. It's extremely a political issue. At the end of the day, Scottsdale has plenty of water for their residents, but because of the fear, because of the drought with the Colorado River, Scottsdale and their people decided, hey, this is our water. Let's not put ourselves in any sort of worse situation to help someone who didn't do a good job storing water. And that's really the fault of Rio Verde. If you're going to build a 1,500 home community, you better have a great water resource to make sure these people have their utilities in the future, right? In the same way you'd make sure they'd have electricity, you better make sure they have water. Rio Verde did not do a good job of this, hence why they had to borrow water of Scottsdale. If they did a great job, I'm sure it would be cheaper to have water right from your sink come from Rio Verde than have to haul it from Scottsdale. So Rio Verde did a bad job of this. They were also warned that this was going to happen. And then Scottsdale cut ties. Scottsdale looks like the bad guy, and they are hurting Rio Verde without a doubt and their residents, but Scottsdale's main priority is to help Scottsdale. It's not to help Rio Verde. If they can, they will, but they decided, hey, we're in a drought. We're going to help our people before we help your people. And so it looks bad on Rio Verde. All this happens, and about 1,200 people live in Rio Verde, and it obviously causes an uproar of those people because now their water prices are going to go up. Their future security is within doubt right now. I honestly don't know where the current scenario is. I don't know anyone living there to necessarily contact. It's on the very outskirts of the Phoenix Valley, so I'm not there too often. And so they're in some risk, and they're hurting right now, but Scottsdale's not. And so that's really why Scottsdale decided to do it, to make sure that they're not hurting in the future. So this happens, hence those news articles we just read. This big headline, Phoenix area, they are losing water. And yes, there is a drought to the Colorado that's affecting just about every state in the west side of the United States. The Colorado River is in a drought. But that doesn't mean that Phoenix is running out of water. What it does mean is Rio Verde is running out of water. They're trying to scramble and figure out what is happening next and have a more secure water source than just begging Scottsdale to bring their water back. Rio Verde has to figure out what that game plan is for them. So if you're in any concern of moving to Phoenix, I would probably be a little bit concerned about Rio Verde's future and what's going to happen there. Now let's look at the rest of Phoenix. So the entire Phoenix area, what is their water scenarios? And are we in any sort of crisis that could happen? You know, maybe will Glendale get cut off one time, or will Buckeye get cut off from their water supplies? Is that type of thing going to happen? Basically, should you be moving here, or is it in 15 years you're not going to be able to drink water, or we're going to have to go to California to go get a drink, although they're probably just as bad of a drought as we are. And so after doing some research, and you can do this all on your own, I'm going to kind of summarize what I have found. At the current moment, the state of Arizona water levels is actually very good. In particular, our reserves. We have years and years. The Arizona government believes we have 15 to 20 years of pure reserves. If we went to an absolute tier 4 drought, I believe is the worst. If we went to that level drought where we almost could get zero water from the Colorado River, we still have 15 to 20 years of reserves in place because they kept it in certain pockets in Arizona. They would basically store this water. At one point, we weren't using all of the water rights we had from the Colorado River, and California and Arizona both had water rights, and a few other states, and all our excess amount was going directly to California because we didn't use it, so it just went to them. And so instead what Arizona said, hey, let's just build some giant reservoirs basically where we could pool this water and we'll save it and just say that we used it. And this was totally legal. They're allowed to do this. It wasn't like they were hiding it, but they decided to find a place to store it, and that's what they did. Another thing Arizona has done is they've really improved their reclamation of water, their reuse of water, basically recycling it, and they've done that in massive improvements. There's a stat that we're using the same amount of water as we did 50 years ago here in Phoenix compared to 1984 to now, that the amount of reclaimed water that we were using. And one of the big risks really is that we ran into, and what Rio Verde ran into, is that when we start to expand so much in Phoenix, there's fears of, hey, we're building so many homes, so many developments, and so many people are moving here. If we're worried about our water supply, maybe we shouldn't build those because they're going to be taking more water and hence spreading it more and more thin. And this was an issue. Phoenix started to realize, hey, we're kind of almost expanding too fast, and maybe we aren't having as secure of a water supply as we maybe thought. So they've created a law that says that builders have to demonstrate a water supply that is undisputed for 100 years. So if they're going to build a new build development, they have to show a 100-year water supply that cannot be disrupted. Or they have to show a sufficient amount of backup supplies that they can use. And this is on top of whatever other developments are there. So in Buckeye, the huge Trevellus neighborhood that's going in, they can't just say, oh, Buckeye has 100 years of water supply. No, they have to do on top of what Buckeye has, including the amount of people that they're building for. can they show 100 years of uninterrupted water supply? That to me is a huge deal, right? That is a big improvement that Phoenix has made to say, we're not going to run out of water supply in these communities, and we're not going to let builders be the reason we run out. So if we just let builders build wherever they wanted, because they want to build here in Phoenix as much as they possibly can. And so they want to build so much, we have to make sure that those residents and the rest of the residents in Phoenix are going to be safe. And so they created this law, 100-year water supply has to be proven for a builder to build a new subdivision. So in my opinion, that in itself, we have 15 to 20 years of pure reserves, and we also have put strict limitations on builders to make sure that we don't run out of water because we've expanded too much. And that in itself has made me fairly confident. And one thing to note, where we get our water supply from, it's primarily from the Colorado River and the Salt River and a lot of the snow runoff that happens up north. So when it comes to rain levels, don't look at, oh, we got 10 inches of rain that month. That means we're doing great in terms of water supply. That's not what actually equals our water supply. Most people know that, but I've been asked that question before, so I had to state it. And a huge question that goes along with this, and I've heard this happen in California before, is the restrictions on water. And so this is why no one in Phoenix knows that there's any sort of water scares. People know of the Rio Verde thing now. But of any sort of water scares is because we've never had restrictions. And it's not because Phoenix is just turning a blind eye and saying, everything's great, guys, but in 10 years we're going to be screwed. They're not doing that. It's because they don't need to. And so there's no restrictions on the amount of time you can water your grass for, the length of your showers, anything of like water pressure regulators. None of that is actually restricted here in Arizona. Now, businesses that could use a lot of water, such as a golf course and such as a car wash, they do have some sort of restrictions. But what Arizona has done, instead of really make restrictions on water, they've made the cost of water slightly more expensive. It's really not crazy here. If you need a reference, for my water, sewer, and trash combined, it's about $80 a month for me. It's combined, so I don't know what it breaks down to. And I have a decent-sized grass in the backyard. So if you didn't have any grass, I'd bet it's closer to $60 a month for water, sewer, and trash. Now, golf courses and these car washes, they're actually really encouraged to recycle their water. And they tend to. The golf courses do this amazing program to make sure that they're recycling their water constantly because that saves them a ton of money. If they were to never reclaim their water or use reclaimed water, they would be spending a crazy amount just to keep these grasses green. And well, in Phoenix, we pride ourselves in our golf, so they're definitely going to use plenty of water, but they do it in a pretty impressive way to not use crazy amounts of water. Yes, it's still a lot compared to a normal business that doesn't have grass, but compared to the size of property and the grass they're using, it's extremely low total usage. So in terms of restrictions, we really don't have any, especially when it comes to you if you're living here. It's not like you can only water your grass on Monday and Fridays for 10 minutes. Here's actually a quote from Phoenix.gov. Even though it is usually dry in the valley, Phoenix will not need to impose mandatory water use restrictions in the foreseeable future. If during the next 10 to 15 years, the West were to experience widespread drought conditions that are as bad or worse than we've seen over the past 15 years, the reduction of available water supplies in the Colorado River and Salt Verde rivers may reach a point where Phoenix would initiate mandatory water use restrictions that go beyond our traditional low water use lifestyle. This gives everyone time to start preparing for such an event. Continued wise planning and water conservation remain big parts of ensuring our water supply, especially if the regional drought lasts for a long time. Phoenix will have the water it needs, but none to waste with your help. So, the main thing I got from that is we are 10 to 15 years away of extreme drought to ever even needing to impose these water restrictions. Again, a positive sign to me. And one reason is Phoenix really has dropped the amount of water they're using. I heard at one point, there was a stat that at one point about over 60% of Phoenix lawns were green and they had grass and they were lush. And now we're down to about 17%. And that may sound like really bad to you, but what they're doing is instead is using more desert landscape and using hardier plants that don't use tons of water. That's kind of been pushed in the landscaping industry for that to happen. And Phoenix residents would prefer it also because it's much cheaper than watering all those plants and watering that grass. So we're doing a lot of great things to make sure we don't get to this drastic point of saying, hey, you can't use that much water. We are not there yet. So ultimately, here's what I think. Here's what I think about, is Phoenix running out of water? My opinion, no, we are not running out of water. Yes, we are in a drought, and yes, the drought could get worse. Phoenix has done some very smart and wise decisions to make sure that if the drought gets extremely drastic, and we are at a point where it is concerning, we have to make smart decisions like having large reservoirs, like restricting what builders can build to make sure we have enough water. If the drought gets worse and we weren't to have those in place, I would say yes, we would be very concerned about our current water supplies. But we have plenty in reserves, and we currently have plenty of access to water that I'm not very concerned about it. If Phoenix made poor decisions and let builders say, hey, they can build as much as they want, or if Phoenix didn't have a great reclamation of water process, I would be concerned about that. But at the moment, I have little to no concerns about our future water supply here in Phoenix, at least in the next 20 to 30 years. If the Colorado River goes dry in 20 years, that would be concerning, but I don't think that would be concerning just for Arizona. That would be just about every western state in the United States. And so if you're concerned about that, that is a different issue. But if you're concerned about the long-term picture of Phoenix and our water supply, I have very little concerns about it because I think we've done what we need to and are going to continue to do what we need to make sure that it doesn't ever get to a point where we do even have to restrict water, let alone run out of water. Right now, we're 15 to 20 years from even restricting water usage, let alone actually running out of water. So, no, I am not very concerned about our water scenario. I think Phoenix has actually done what they need to make sure that we don't get to drastic points here in Phoenix. So anyways, again, I'm not a water supply expert. I don't have a PhD in this, but from the research I've done, I feel confident in what I've said, and that's why I'm going to stay here. I'm not moving out of Phoenix because we're running out of water. I'm planning on living here for a long time, and water is not even a thought that comes into mind on why I would move from here. So thank you so much for watching. More videos will be coming out about living in Phoenix, so stay tuned for that. I do have a free Moving to Phoenix guide, so if you want that, my email number on the screen. It's everything I wish I knew before moving to Phoenix. Totally free to you. Just email me and I'll get that over to your inbox. Thanks for watching.